Hello, my name is Marcia Marley, and I want to welcome everyone to a very special Succeed Together Montclair Literary Festival event. As president of Succeed Together, the parent organization of the Montclair Literary Festival, I am extremely honored to welcome tonight's special guests, the distinguished Salman Rushdie, interviewed by another amazing author, Nathan Englander. Thanks to our directors, S2G's Montclair Literary Festival has featured an amazing list of authors during this pandemic. This last March, we presented our online Global Voices Festival, which include Joy Reid and Don Lemon, last year's Booker Prize winner, Douglas Stewart, with actor, filmmaker, and writer Alan Cumming, as well as two former poet laureates, Billy Collins and Sir Andrew Motion. We are also busy planning our hybrid, both in-person as well as online festival, which is scheduled for October 2nd. Please save the date and check our website, succeedtogether.org, for further information. All proceeds from this and other literary festival ticket events benefit Succeed Together, whose mission is to level the playing field so all children and families can access the educational resources that only a few can afford. Your tickets tonight support S2G's Wraparound College Readiness Program called Pathways Forward, our year-round one-on-one tutoring services, and our many enrichment workshops, and of course, our literary festival events. Because of your generosity during this very difficult year, we have been able to maintain and expand all of Succeed Together's programs, including the Literary Festival. I want to thank all our volunteers and generous festival sponsors for making that expansion possible, including Rayos Homemade, Ameriprise Financial, West of Hudson Realtors, and our festival partner, Watch On Booksellers. I have been a fan of Salman Rushdie since reading Midnight's Children while still in graduate school, and have continued to read his many novels and essays ever since. I have also become a more recent fan of Nathan Englander's works. He was a featured author at our festival 2 years ago. I want to thank our festival directors, Jackie Ross and Deputy Director Katrina Browning, for making this event happen. I now turn it over to Jackie to introduce our two authors.
Thank you, Marcia. And I also want to thank Claire and Catherine for helping out tonight in a pinch. So if you have a question for today's speakers, you can click on the Ask a Question bar on the bottom right of your screen. We are honored to have these two acclaimed authors here tonight. Nathan Englander is the author of 2 story collections and 3 novels, The Ministry of Special Cases, Dinner at the Center of the Earth, and Cottage.com. He's the recipient of the Guggenheim Fellowship, a PEN Malamud Award, the Frank O'Connor International Short Story Award, and he was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. His play, What We Talk About When We Talk About Anne Frank, will premiere soon in San Diego, and his novel, Dinner at the Center of the Earth, is being adapted for television by Showtime. He is a distinguished writer in residence at NYU and lives in Toronto with his wife and children. Salman Rushdie is the author of 12 novels, including Midnight's Children, for which he won the Booker Prize, as well as Shame and the Satanic Verses. He has also published 4 works of nonfiction and co-edited 2 anthologies. He is a member of the American Academy of Arts and Letters and a distinguished writer in residence at NYU. A former president of PEN American Center, Rushdie was knighted in 2007 for services to literature. Welcome to both of you, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Hello.
Hi, thanks for having us. Hi, Salman.
Hi, how are you, Nathan?
Good, good. So good to see you. I guess I'm moderating. So yeah, I was thinking we've done a lot of it. I have been to a lot of romantic places with you for people who aren't dating. I was thinking back. I remember, yeah, anyway, I see a lot of beaches. We went to good dinners. Anyway, but here we are. This is our first event inside the computer machine. So excited to break that new ground. And Yes, I read this book carefully, and I'm not going to start with the Pinter essay, but I did learn from the Pinter essay, which is you should compliment a writer at the start so it's clear where we stand. Anyway, I really, really love this book. It was a joy, honestly, just a joy, and my head's still spinning. And it's been a pretty isolating year for a lot of us. It was just nice to be excited about writing, and you know how I feel about your work and you, so it was just nice to have a lot of stuff I deeply believe confirmed, and we'll talk a lot about that. And my only hot tip for those of you who are just getting the book, I know a copy came with your virtual ticket, an actual copy with a virtual ticket, but oh, I thought it was pretty delicious to just read my way around the book. Like, I just jumped from essay to essay completely out of order, which is how I also read short story collections, and that was just a super fun way to do it. And that's how I'm going to run this event, because we have so little time, so I better talk faster because I have like 9,000 pages of questions. So I'm going to jump into the first essay, Wonder Tales, which is just so heartening to me. It really made me feel less alone. Like, I went to, I did an MFA, and I never understood one would go out and have pizzas, and then everyone the next day would hand in these stories called "We Had a Pizza." I've always been of the story should have a story to it. I like fiction to my fiction. And this essay, it's not a defense of it. It's really just a celebration of story, of imagination, and what I love about reading and about your work, what I want in a book. And yeah, I was just wondering if you'd talk about that.
Yeah, well, I think the reason it's the first essay in the book is because maybe the first thing that happened to me as a reader, long before I was a writer, was to be offered this cornucopia of wonderful, fabulous tales which were available to anybody growing up in India, as I did, and if that's your first experience of literature, it gives you a wonderful thing to carry through your life, and so I wanted to start with that kind of stories that are obviously made up, stories which are obviously not true. I mean, Madame Bovary is also not true. Yeah. But people think of it differently than they think of fairy tales and fables and mythologies and so on. Actually, they're all untrue, and that's the, as I say, the great gift that was given to me by my place of origin. And one of the great things about some of the fables that you grow up with in India, for example, the animal fables that you find in the Panchtantra, is that they're not goody-goody fables. Aesop's fables all have nice little mottos at the end, don't be greedy, be nice, etc. The Panchtantra has no such pretensions, and very, very often in these fables, the bad guys win. Completely unashamedly, the bad guys get away with it, and that makes them read in a very modern way. They're not improving tales. They're warnings that the world contains crooks.
Yes,
and as a result, they're much more useful.
Yes. Well, that's this is the longest I've gone without mentioning Jews or Nazis, but I'll get to both. But that takes me right back to my childhood. Yes, I'm super with you. Like, yes, all these lovely songs we sang, and once my Hebrew got better, it was all like, and I will cleave my enemy's head with a, anyway, it was just lots of violence.
The Jewish tradition, I mean, I think the Jewish stories of Eastern Europe, are not at all dissimilar. All the kind of Dibbuks and golems and all of that, the stuff that comes out in work like by people like Isaac Bashevis Singer, and I feel a great fellow feeling with that stuff as well.
Okay, that was literally my next question to this was I've got Singer written all over my page because that was beautiful. I really do feel that kinship, in your work and his work, and I really do think it comes from that culture of stories and learning how the world works through these stories. Like you said, like there is violence, there is love, but all of it through story. That's how I got everything. And I feel like both of you dip into that. And that takes me, to that quote of yours: from my earliest days, I have been, and I still am, a traveler in wonderlands. And I just really wanted you to talk about that, if there's anything more to say, as it really did tie into Singer and really reminded me of my own childhood.
Well, as well as singer, a writer that I thought about a lot when I was writing this piece was Calvino, because Calvino actually edited a big edition of Italian folk tales, and many people suspect that he made up several of them. That they're not all real folk tales. Some of them are kind of Calvino stories. And what is wonderful is that you can't tell which is which, but this idea that we have this encyclopedia, of wonderful stories. And I love the idea that stories are fictive, that I think children understand immediately that flying carpets don't fly, but children know immediately that if you rub a lamp, a genie doesn't appear. So we know that these things are not true in that sense, but we also know that they're very beautifully true within the tale, and they tell us truths about human nature, and that's why I love them so much, because they are another way. I said somewhere in the book that this kind of writing also approaches the truth, but it comes in through a different door,
Yes.
and that's what I like about it.
But and I'm going to turn this into therapy. It's my hour to run. But I guess I'm really interested because I'm always I'm sort of a failed atheist. I'm always trying. But I feel like you're so good at being able to, as you keep adding, fictive to it and fiction and made up, I feel like you're able to take all the lessons. You have to truly believe the stories to write in that world. But I feel like you're intellectually free of a lot of the baggage that comes along with it, which I am not. I'm always amazed at how you manage that split, because you can't do the work without believing, obviously.
Yeah, well, I mean, godlessness kind of comes naturally to me.
Yeah.
So there's just that. And I mean, one of the groups of stories that I really like are what we now call mythologies, which were originally religious stories. Say the what we call the Greek and Roman myths were originally the stories of the Greek and Roman religion. What we now call Norse mythology was also that these were the texts of a religion, and so my view has always been, if you could just detach these stories from their religious origins, then you can read them as wonderful stories. And of course, India is full of those. I mean, the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, these are, first of all, some of the longest, maybe the longest books ever written. But they also are full of gods. I mean, I remember being very impressed a long time ago when some insane scholar in India decided to try and count the number of gods that there were in India. Not just the big famous deities, but all the little local gods of river, of stream and wood and so on. And he came up with this astonishing figure of 300 million gods.
Yeah.
And that means that if you project the population of India backwards, about 60 or 70 years, there would have been a time when there were more gods than people.
Yes. That's like France and cheeses.
Yes, that's a very, very good analogy.
Yes.
Sort of gods as brands of cheese.
Yes. I'm going to get on Reddit after this. I guarantee you there's a subreddit with a list. I'm going to ask a younger person to look it up for me. Anyway, yes, now I want to talk about all these stories and how they repeat. But again, I'm going to stay on point today. There's so much. I know there's got to be, hello, nice audience. I know there's got to be a zillion people writing or dreaming of writing. If you're dreaming of writing, just start writing. But I know there's a bunch of writers out there. And I have to say, this book is also so there's so much stuff that's just helpful for putting your head down and understanding what matters. But I almost honestly didn't become a writer because of Write What You Know. I was raised by a TV set. I went to the mall. I was like, who the fuck? We can curse. They can sign out. Anyway, but I was like, who wants to read about Roosevelt Field Mall? I had to go to Stalin prison. My point is, I love, and there's another one later in the book, but if I love your point about Write What You Know, if you want to discuss that. It's honestly life-saving for young writers.
Well, I tell you, I'll tell the story, when I started to write Midnight Children, the family at the heart of the book was much more like my family than it is now. There are still some surface similarities, like I had a grandfather who was a doctor and so does Salim in the book. And I had another, an uncle by marriage who was a general in the Pakistan army, and there is such a character in the book. But they're not at all like their points of origin. And what I was finding was that when I was trying to make portraits of my grandfather and my uncle, right, the stuff on the page was completely inert and uninteresting. Yes. And then I started making them not like my grandfather and my uncle, and they immediately came to life. Right. And so I thought, oh, that's what you do. You don't simply imitate the world, right, that you know. You make it up. You remake it. You reinvent it. And that was an early lesson. Since then, I've also come to feel that there's a sense in which fiction writing is related to journalism, to reportage, in that you need to go and find things out. Yeah. That instead of, so yes, okay, write what you know, but increase the sum of what you know.
Yes.
Go and find out something interesting and then write about that. I've always thought that I like it if when I finish a book, I know something that I didn't know when I started the book.
Yes.
Yes. So there's a kind of learning and discovery involved in writing. Yes. And I've always thought that about books. Go get out of don't write about this room.
All right.
Because the world is outside this room.
Yes.
And go there. Yes. And I've been lucky in a way that my life has taken me out of several rooms and into other rooms, and I've had long experience of at least 3 different countries, and that shows me just how rich the world is, that is not your given from your own life, and go find that out. And I love Dickens for how much of his society he can write about. He can write about everything from like archbishops to pickpockets, and with seemingly with knowledge, personal knowledge. So write what you know for Charles Dickens involves knowing an enormous amount of stuff.
Yes.
And this is what I think. Go find things out. Go find things out and then write about that. I guess what I'm saying more seriously is that many writers start with some little nugget of stuff that's driving them to write. And yeah, of course, that is the thing that makes you a writer, and you should use it. But at a certain point, for most of us, there's a point at which that nugget of stuff runs out.
Yes.
and then what?
Yeah.
And the answer to "and then what" is find stuff out.
Yes. And I don't want to gloss over because it's such a giant moment that you shared in passing, but there really is that moment when a character, when you're just suffering and they're just flat. I like, you said it out loud, but it's like that's the sweet moment when you have a book, when they just become alive, when you make that change, and it's just exciting. But yes, right. Well, I was like, have you been in love? I feel like it's emotional knowing, like the rest you have to, make up. And I said, I'll jump to the end because, yes, this book is 2003 to 2020. And I feel like you made a really important decision. And I know you want my approval on that you're seeking that. But, I remember Andy Borowitz once at an event, he was telling this story, a moth event on stage, and he was killing it. And he was dying in the story, and then he has surgery and he survives, and we all gasped, and he yelled at us. He's like, I'm obviously alive. He was very insulted by us not understanding, But, you end this with a really affecting essay about having COVID. And first of all, you can't control the moments. Like, you're clearly going to press or close to it when this comes around. And I was really happy because a book has to move into the future, and it's a really weird span of time. If you wouldn't have, I thought that was such an important final essay. So I'm glad you're doing well. And yes, I guess I want to talk about the choice to add that essay and to talk about being sick. And there's a million things I want to talk about within that essay, but I just thought it was a huge decision.
I owe that essay and that decision to my publisher, because there was a bit of me that was reluctant to write it because I thought it could easily be kind of narcissistic at a time when hundreds of thousands of people were dying.
Yes.
Listen to me, let's not pay attention to the mountain, the growing mountain of the dead, Yes. I also thought that this was a thing that was happening to all of us at the same time, and And so maybe we all already knew everything. And what could I say that would tell you something you didn't know? And so I had those reservations, and I was simply persuaded that what I should do is write something like for the record of what it was like and what New York was like at the time, and what the implications of this thing might be, and just think about it, And in the end, I was happy with how it turned out, and I'm glad you liked it. But I mean, I did get it. I got the thing very, very early, right at the beginning, when we hardly knew what it was, in the middle of March of last year, and I got it pretty. It took me about 2.5 weeks to get better, but I was spared the worst of it. I didn't have the breathing issues.
Yes.
I didn't have the blood oxygen problems. The things that were really life-threatening and lethal, I didn't have. So I lucked out, and ever since then, as I've watched the cataclysm, I've just felt luckier and luckier. I mean, right now, I've been talking most days to friends in India, where the calamity is just off the scale, and of course, what that government has in common with the government of what Joe Biden calls the previous guy,
Yes.
Is that they lie all the time.
Yes.
So even a source as non-radical as the New York Times suggests that the real numbers in India are 10 times what they're saying.
Yes, and it's places, we both, been a lot of places, and places that even, trying to cannot measure the size of it,
Okay, and I mean, I literally don't know anybody in India who has not lost somebody.
Yes.
And so I just feel luckier and luckier, that I really dodged a bullet here, and I remember, as I don't know if you were in New York at that time, but I mean, it was sad, the city, to see the city kind of broken, and deserted, and with everything dying everywhere. I mean, not just people, but also businesses, and the life of the city. And then rather wonderful to see it come back, So, and what is remarkable now, sitting here in New York today, 1 year ago, this was the most dangerous place in America.
Yeah.
And now it's just about the safest, and that transition has just been extraordinary to watch. So I mean, I just in the end thought I would write about it, and
well, it functions as a nice time capsule, because that's it. You didn't make any claims. It was really moving to read, even where you're like, I hope we'll be on set. You just, before we got on, we were in the green room, and you're like, Yankee Stadium's back. You're saying, will there be subways? It's exciting to read it and being like, oh my God, New York is.
I really didn't know if people would go to the movies again. And it seems that they will. I didn't know if people would be willing to sit in small seats next to each other at Madison Square Garden, but it seems that they do. And this is the miracle of the vaccines. And I just think people maybe still undervalue what an extraordinary scientific miracle.
It's a miracle, literally a miracle.
I've witnessed. I remember, about last November-ish, I was talking to my doctor, and when it was not clear that we would have the vaccines, and I remember saying to my doctor, suppose the vaccines don't work, what happens then? And he smiled, a very nice smile, and he said, we're all going to die.
Yes.
And the fact that we've gone in 6 months from a situation where we feared that we were all going to die to a situation in which we can actually begin to see the end of this.
Yes.
Is an astounding miracle. I mean, if these people don't win the Nobel Prize, then there's no reason for the Nobel Prize.
Right.
I also rather love it that the Pfizer vaccine was developed in Germany by a husband and wife team of Turkish immigrants.
Yes, huge. Yes.
And in this moment, speaking as an immigrant,
yes,
in this moment when immigrants are under attack all over the place for all kinds of terrible reasons, it is wonderful that it's the immigrants who save the world.
Yes. That's funny. There's a comedian like Gary Goldman is like, if you're an anti-Semite, he goes, don't get the polio vaccine and no birth control. He's like, but
Exactly.
Don't be a xenophobe and line up for Pfizer. Unfortunately, in the States, the xenophobes are not lining up for Pfizer, so I can't even call them hypocrites. I wish I could. Get your vaccines, folks. Yes, and I really want you to tell, I loved your antidote. It's quite a hopeful essay, but we don't have time for that, but maybe at the end. But the anecdote about the shipwrecked Australians was so lovely, really fun. But this meant the world to me also, and I won't get too right early. I'll move back to other things. But you said at the end, in reality, this is such a nice gift because I told you I've got littles here. You know, you remember that stage. Your kids are bigger, but like I'm up all night, no coverage. Like I have a million reasons to say why work was so hard. But like you said, we write. It's a like emotional, spiritual thing. The world is in just such a cataclysm. And you say, in reality, I found it hard to write. Many other writers to whom I spoke also told me that was hard to work. The roar of the real world was deafening and left no quiet space in which an imagined world might grow. I just thought that was, I don't know if you have what to say on that.
I remember people saying, gee, this must be a great time to be a novelist because you've got all this time to sit at home.
Yes.
And I thought, 500,000 people are dead, but gee, it's great to be a novelist.
Yes, yeah.
And
for our friends who are both emotional on the page and sociopaths, I'm sure they got a lot of work done. But
and there are some of them.
Yes, we can list those at the end too. And again, I look forward to getting together. But the only deceptive thing in this book, I also want to warn the readers. I don't think I said this out loud yet, but I'm sleep deprived. Is he sneaks in so many writers. So you think you're reading about Kurt Vonnegut, and Salman slips in. Not like honestly, I'm going to read forever here and reread forever. There's so many great books, but I'm dying to talk about Voices from Chernobyl, which I love with you. A million books I want to talk about.
Well, it's a book of an obsessed of a lifelong bookworm.
Yeah, and that's what I guess that's what I really want to ask you. Like, I'll jump around. I'll find those questions. 2 books that really pop up in here. I'm really going out of order now, but your rereading of The Tin Drum and of War and Peace was really interesting to me. Just recognizing how the books don't change, the world changes, the way we read that changes. So. Yes, I'd love to hear about. First of all, how much time do you spend reading? And are you a quick reader? I'm the world's slowest reader.
I'm a quick reader, but when I'm reading something that I love, I slow right down.
That's a nice compliment.
The more I like the book, the slower I read it.
Yes.
So if I need to just gut the book, I can do that quite fast.
Yeah.
But if I'm actually having pleasure, I don't want the pleasure to end. So I slow down.
That's
I remember, that George Steiner's book, Tolstoy or Dostoevsky, which says that we all have to choose, are we Tolstoy or are we Dostoevsky people?
Yeah.
In the way that the people used to say, are you Beatles or Rolling Stones, and the possibility of both didn't exist.
Yes.
And I started out saying, when I was young, saying, oh, obviously Dostoevsky, that's my guy. And now it's not so. I've flipped. I'm now a Tolstoy guy.
Yeah.
Not to say that I don't like Dostoevsky, but if I'm asked to choose who stays in the balloon, I might choose Tolstoy, not Dostoevsky. And with The Tin Drum, I had real trouble when I read it. I
was going to say that's one. I'm going to pick it up again, but I love the front, and then I slowed, and I only feel safe if authors are no longer with us. But anyway, yes, I will reread it because of this, because
Yeah, I literally read it when I was young, and I sort of I just didn't get it. I just thought, ugh. And I didn't finish it, and I left it alone, and literally 10 years later, picked it off the shelf, and just drowned in it, and thought this is one of the most extraordinary things I've read.
Yes.
And I still think that, so books are very patient,
Yes.
they wait for their readers.
Yes, and I love remember Stoner, where like I can handle when a writer becomes famous 100 years later, but I feel like he died like 3 years before, and then someone wrote a review in London, and then he sold like 9 million copies. But I was like, the book found its time. The author just missed it by like a year.
Yeah, I remember thinking my dear friend in England, Angela Carter, her books were always thought of as these kind of cranky, eccentric, marginal things in English literature, and then she died. And the week after she died, her last book went to #1 in the bestseller list.
Yes.
And I thought she would be so pissed off that she wasn't there to see it.
Yes.
Because she minded. I mean, she minded. You know, she was a great supporter when we were young of myself and of Ian McEwan and, you know, other young writers. She was very generous, very open-hearted supporter. But she kind of minded that people like Ian and me went somewhere that she'd commercially, that she never did, you know? And so, yeah, that now there's somebody said to me, she's now the British writer most studied in British universities.
Crazy. That's lovely in its way. Yeah.
And she would be furious.
Yes. And to furious, I can jump to Bellow and Roth. They're both often furious. But first of all, maybe, if it's of interest, you can talk about humor in your writing, but like, no matter how serious, like I read Joseph Anton, even the scariest moments in your own personal life, like you make me laugh. Point is your page on your own experience with anti-Semitism. I loved, and I was howling in the Roth essay. You can tell that, but I just loved talking about cultural references and words not explained. And this idea with just certain cultures and certain peoples, you know, why we should not explain and why your sentence better explained for you. I would love, I love, you know, in charge and under trial. I'd love for you to talk about Indian English and being a reader of cultures different. My thing is Game of Thrones. I'm like, do you have a dragon? Well, can you understand Game of Thrones? Like suddenly people are like, what's matzah? I'm like, you can watch Game of Thrones, but you can't read about matzah. It goes in the mouth, you know, like, anyway. So yes, please address, because I want to.
One of the joys of English is the way in which it naturalizes all over the place. You know, so I mean, so America, of course, has many Englishes. You know, it has depending on your race and your region. You know, your English is different, and you know, the Caribbean has its own versions of English, and Ireland has Irish English, and etc. And India has very elaborately got its own vocabulary of English. So yeah, I mean, I remember coming to England and using the word thrice when I meant 3 times.
Yes.
And people would look at you strangely.
Yes.
And the side plate, when you sit down to eat a meal, the little plate to the side of your main plate, what I grew up calling that a quarter plate.
Awesome.
And if you said, you know, I'd like some butter on my quarter plate,
yes,
nobody would know what you were saying. And yes, the person who's accused of a crime in court is called the under trial, and because he's under trial. And your boss is called your in charge because he's in charge, and you know, so on and so on. And on top of that, Bombay, where I grew up, has a very personal slang of its own, which people in the rest of India don't understand, which is a mixture of, I think in the Moore's Last Sigh, I used this acronym to describe the 5 languages of Bombay, to Hindi, Urdu, Gujarati, Marathi, and English. So I call it Hug Me.
Yeah.
And on top of Hug Me, there's this other thing called Bambaya, which is the local slang,
right?
In which some English words get in. For example, the word ghora, which means a horse, is referred to, it means a gun.
Oh, no way. Okay.
Things like that. So you have this great linguistic playfulness. You know, that, and I think it's one of the things about growing up in a multilingual place, you know, where in order to function, you have to have some knowledge of many different languages. You know, you don't have to be fluent in all of them, but you have to have some knowledge. And so it allows you to be playful in your use. I mean, when we used to speak in Bombay, there would be words from 2 or 3 languages in a sentence.
Yeah.
Just because of what was the appropriate word. You'd reach for the most appropriate word.
Yes.
You know, Punjabi, for example, is a great language to swear in.
Yeah. I knew we were going to get to cursing. I was already thinking of Hebrew, where we curse in Russian, Arab, everything.
Yeah. And talking of Hebrew, I mean, I remember having this discussion with David Grossman, where I talked about the malleability of English and how I loved that about English, that you could bend it and twist it and shape it to your own needs. and how it was the best language in the world for that. And he said, don't be stupid, that's Hebrew.
Yes. Yeah.
Hebrew is what you can do that in, you know?
Yes.
So it appears that there are two languages.
Except I once got in trouble at a reading there where I said War and Peace is 11 pages in translation. There's like 9 words in Hebrew. So, but for your in charge, I'm telling you this one. But my favorite Hebrew to English words is the front axle in your car is your front axle, and the back axle is it's the rear front axle, which is to me an excellent adaptation. Oh, but you talk pretty seriously about losing old places or sense of place of, paraphrasing your own novel, losing the ground beneath your feet in the Roth essay. And as a new transplant to Toronto, and yeah, I think I'm on my 3rd or 4th country now. I am very much displaced. I guess I want to know, if you would address that idea of what feels like home when you're writing in your writer's head, or are you home right now? Your kids are everywhere, like your family's in different places. I'd love to hear about, if you're on site.
Yeah, just a complicated and fragmented idea of home. That's just, you're right. I mean, I have, most of my immediate family is across the Atlantic, on the other side of the ocean. And yet I've lived here for 21 years. And so it's easy to think of both places as home and not being completely at ease in either place. And I think what happens is it changes with the weather. There are days when I feel absolutely at home, and there are days when I feel absolutely uprooted and homeless. And I think that weather keeps changing.
That's heartening.
But I do think that for that reason, the subject of place became very, very important in my writing. That until I was absolutely certain of the ground on which the book was going to stand, I couldn't begin to move people around on it. And of course there are writers with the opposite life experience who can assume the ground. Faulkner could assume Yoknapatawpha County. It's just right there. Garcia Marquez could assume Macondo, because he grew up in it. In the way that R.K. Narayan in India could build on his childhood in Mysore and make that his fictional Malgudi, and it served him for his whole life. And Eudora Welty could write about the South, and there she was in the middle of it. And I don't have that good fortune, So for me, place has to be constructed each time. It has to be rebuilt and constructed, and until I feel that I'm on solid ground, I can't go forward. So.
Oh, that's so good, and I really have the thought that follows that. But I think we're also supposed to entertain people, and you have such good stories. So I'm going to come back to Amrita Shergill and place, and I want to talk about that. But I'm taking a pause because you both said Marquez and Welty, and 2 favorite things in the book. Will you talk about your non-meeting with Marquez or your own?
Yes,
I wrote that, and then I'll ask you a Welty question.
And I never met him. I met quite a lot of the Latin Americans, and I was friendly with Carlos Fuentes, and I'm still friendly with Mario Vargas Llosa, but I never met the great Gabo, So, so I was in Mexico City one time, and I was actually having dinner at somebody's house, and Carlos Fuentes was there, and he said to me, of all the writers in the world, it's insane that you two have not met. And it so happened that although Garcia Marquez had a house in Mexico, he wasn't there because he was visiting Fidel Castro in Cuba.
Yes, of course. As one does.
As one does. So at a certain point, Carlos left the dinner table and went into another room. And then he came back and he said, there's a phone call and you have to come to the phone. So I went to the phone, and Garcia Marquez was on the other end of the phone because Carlos had called him up and said, there's a guy here you need to talk to, And what was strange about it was that my spoken Spanish is more or less non-existent, but I sort of understand a bit. Yes. And he didn't like to speak English, but he understood a fair bit. And we both had about the same level of bad French. And so we talked to each other in these 3 broken languages.
Yes.
But in my memory of the conversation, there is no language problem. We're just talking to each other.
That's lovely. Yes.
And I mean, he gave me one of the greatest compliments anybody ever gave me, where he said, at my age, I don't really read very much anymore outside the Spanish language.
Yes.
And he said, but there are two guys that I like to know what they're doing. And he said, one is J.M. Coetzee and the other is you.
Lovely.
I thought, I'll take that. I'll take that.
A fine pair.
Take that to the bank,
Yes.
So that was my only meeting with him, but it was special. It felt special.
Yes.
I used to invite him when I was the president of PEN America and running the World Voices Festival. Yeah. I would invite him every single year, and he'd send back a series of very polite refusals.
Yes.
He never came.
Yes, I remember a friend was trying to get Philip Roth to go to a hotel, a bed at a hotel, and he's like, "It sounds lovely." He goes, "Tell me the name of the hotel. I'll go when you're not there." I thought that was always a good. Anyway, so Amrita Shergill, I have 11,000. This is going to go for 9 hours. No, I will stop at the polite time. Back to research. I just love this. We were talking about Amrita Shergill and The Moor's Last Sigh, where you say, I did not know much about her in those days. I knew she was half Hungarian and had seen some of her paintings. And while I was writing my book, I resisted knowing more, which again, I just think is such like a gem of how we do research. People think you have to learn everything. I was like, no, you need to learn the right things and hide furiously from the other things. And I don't know if you want to talk about that, but
yeah, exactly. I mean, Amrita, the thing that I got from her was that she was Bohemian at a point where it was really not okay to be Bohemian in India.
Right.
And she, she had love affairs with women as well as men. She was on the one hand a disciple of Gandhi, but on the other hand a great follower of European modernist painting. Right. She was, interestingly complicated, and very daring, and infuriated her family. There's letters from her father about how ashamed they are of her.
Yes.
But so I thought at that point, stop. I don't need to know all that because I'm not going to have an ashamed father in my novel and so on.
Right.
It gave me permission to invent a flamboyant woman who was prepared to break all social rules and be a great painter because Amrita Shergill was. And so my character Aurora could not have been born without the existence of Amrita Shergill, but she's not actually like her at all, except in that quality of fearlessness.
Yes.
Which is what I needed from her.
Yes. And then I'll go to questions I'm going to ask one more here. I'll smush Pinter together with Harold and Amrita. I'll make them friends. But just you say writing to her close friend and ally Carl Kandelavala. She talks about his art criticisms in terms that might have damaged a lesser friendship. And you include an excerpt with chestnuts like this, that his writing creates no powerful or lasting impression on the mind, and she thinks that's due to his choice of words, which I can't think of anything more cutting or mean. And then you talk about Pinter saying there's no truth, there's no one way, and both that he's angry and then brutally honest. And I love your anecdote about his poems getting facts. But I'm really interested. I'm so sensitive, and every writer is sensitive. And I guess I want to know what you do. Like you personally, you have received so much support for your work, so many accolades. You're Sir Salman, you're my knighted friend. But also because of that, I have seen you. This is not subjective or my opinion, or I'm defensive of you. I've seen you treated unfair. Like I've seen people, give stuff they're just literally trying to even out, lower the pedestal. Reviews where I'm like, this is nonsense. For real.
I learned a while ago that the kind of reception that my work gets.
Yes.
Is I either get 11 out of 10,
yes,
or I get minus 11 out of 10.
Yes.
And there's nothing in the middle.
Yes.
There are people clearly who, for reasons that I find mysterious, want to set out to destroy my reputation, and good luck to them.
Yes. But I honestly want to ask, this is but where do you put it? Do you let that stream run by?
No, it's upsetting. It's upsetting and it's hurtful.
Yes.
And because I don't understand where it's coming from. It's not that these are people that I know.
Yes.
Or indeed have ever met.
Yes.
So it's not like they have some axe to grind because I said something that they didn't like.
Yes.
I mean, they're strangers. They're strangers, and you know the malice of strangers is more shocking than the malice of people you know.
Oh, that's so. I don't know if I want that over my desk, but I'll kind of put that. The Malice of Strangers is going to be there. There's a movie. I'm going to make a noir kind of. Then I'm going to ask one fun Eudora Welty question. I think of when I met you, you were about this age when I met you. Like time goes. Like I think of the people I met that I just had soup with. You know, like Arthur Miller. I used to get to have lunch, and now he's like a legend who existed a long time ago. When you
I'm now older than Eudora was when I met her.
Isn't that crazy? So I saw, and I literally went to the internets where you can check facts, but someone said that, you know, Harriet Tubman was alive both with Thomas Jefferson and Ronald Reagan, and it like crushed American history for me. So I guess who that you met at the beginning of your career that was late career that you know, is there someone that you think like that was like meeting history?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first great writer that I met, great poet, was the Urdu poet Faiz Ahmed Faiz.
Yeah.
Who was one of the great poets of the 20th century in the Urdu language, which is a great language for poetry. You know, and he was my aunt's best friend.
Cool.
And so I would meet him as a kid, like a kind of extra uncle, you know.
Yes.
And I literally sat on his knee.
Yes.
And when one of my sisters got married, he came to like perform the marriage ceremony and toasted her and her husband in whiskey, which shocked all the Muslims in the room.
Yes.
Because he was a communist. He was a serious communist.
Right.
And he was a winner of the Stalin Prize. And
I love when you said that in the book, the Stalin Prize, which I'm obsessed with. Like, yes, you can buy one on eBay. There are a few thousand. You know, I want the pin.
Anyway, so that was the first. And what I got from him,
yes,
was an idea of what a writer needed to be, because he was on the one hand a wonderful love poet. He was a kind of Neruda level love poet, you know. And the love poetry was always a little off, you know. I'm not sure that you would want to be the subject of one of his love poems.
Yes.
They were always a little bit off, but he was also a public poet, you know, who would write about, you know, the independence of India, the bloodshed of the partition, and so on. So I thought, oh well, that's what you do. You have a private self and you have a public self, and that's what it is to be a writer.
I'm really into proximity, and this is again, I'll put it on the list to talk another time about that, but like you're making me think of you as little Balthus, where like he was 6 and drawing, and his mom's boyfriend was Rilke. He's like, do you want to, I'll illustrate your poems. I'm like, that's a nice job for a 6-year-old. But I do think seeing, to me, like the first time I saw a real, I think I didn't know it was possible till I was in the room with a real writer. I'm like, oh, there are people who write, it cracks your brain open. I think it's honestly not a tiny thing to get to absorb that.
No, because my family, I don't know about your family, my family was not a great artistic, literary, cultural family, you know. Yeah. My father was a businessman and you know, I mean, he had books in the house, but I don't think he thought in a bookish way. And my mother's sister, my aunt, was the kind of intellectual in the family.
Yes.
And so through her, I was able to meet Faiz and some other guys.
Yes. My mom's watching, so I can't say what. No, we loved art, but I blame her why I'm not religious, because she was subversive. We were so religious, but she loved art. So like that's her great. Anyway, but yeah, no, I'm not from this world, and you never feel like you are from it, no matter what happens, which is a whole separate discussion too if you don't come from it. I'm going to go to questions now. Let's see what we got. Oh yay, these are the nice ones. Okay. And thank you all for watching. We're not going yet. I'm just saying thanks for these questions and for being here. What are you reading? What are you reading now, and who are some of the newer authors that you like?
Well, you know, I'm glad to have this question, because one of the things that I've found in these last 20 years that I've been living in America is that I'm being very inspired by writers much younger than myself. Which is unusual. You know, I mean, normally you read your generation and you read the great dead. You know, and you lose touch with what's coming after.
Yes.
But I think that there's a thing happening in American literature which is very interesting. That for a start, there's a generation of African American writers who I think are completely changing the game. Completely
super on fire. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah. Colson Whitehead, Jessamine Ward, Tracy K. Smith, Natasha Trethewey, et cetera. Ta-Nehisi Coates, Lloyd Parks. I mean, any number. Just really.
I love Luster. That was Raven. Anyway, yes.
Exactly. Which that's on my bedside table right now, my nightstand. And also, in addition to that, African American, the Black writing, there's also writing by American writers who are either immigrants or the children of recent immigrants. And it used to be that immigrant literature in America meant either Eastern European immigrant of the Singer kind, or it meant South European Italian immigrants, of the kind of Mario Puzo kind, let's say. But now the immigrant American writers come from everywhere. You have like Viet Thanh Nguyen from Vietnam. You have Junot Diaz from the Caribbean. You have Jhumpa Lahiri from South Asia. You have, Yi Yun Lee from China. I just think it's so interesting what is happening to American literature in the hands of these writers. And then it makes me think, okay, well, that's me too. I got here with a suitcase full of stuff from elsewhere, and maybe I'll unpack my suitcase and let everything come and see what happens. So it has been inspiring to see what these younger writers are doing.
Yes, and you're nice to them. I want to say to the people out here, you've been always nice to them.
Well, because I like what they're up to.
Yes. These are great. How closely do you, and the names they've been filtered to the thing anyway, so I would be screaming your names. How closely do you work with translators of your own books? Great question.
Again, the answer is, if it's a new translator, then usually quite closely, because what happens is that they have a lot of questions. But when they've done a couple of my books, they kind of know me better than I know me. And they don't have to ask that much. And sometimes they point things out which are kind of borderline embarrassing. So I've actually had translators say to me, on page 213 of your novel, you have this character says such and such, and as of course in your earlier novel of 20 years ago, on page 320, this completely different character says the same thing.
Yes.
And I'm wondering why you wanted to make this intertextual connection between them.
That's so funny. I get everything to my Italian translator because she'll be like, Wednesday is Tuesday in chapter. I'm like, of course I knew that. But you know what? I'll go with yours. Let's make it Wednesday again. But
nobody reads you more closely than your translator.
Yeah. And it's kind of beautiful, the languages you don't speak. I'll sit there in German and not get a word. I'll be like, I think everybody should laugh now if everything's done. And then you can feel your voice, right?
Yes, you can. And I mean, I think it's the most underrated part of the literary world, the art of translation. And so many of the writers that I love most deeply, I've only ever read in translation.
Yes.
I haven't read Garcia Marquez. I've read Gregory Rabassa. I haven't read Günter Grass. I've read Ralph Manheim.
Yes. And you fall in love when they do new one. I'm like, I'm a Constance Garnett guy. Like, it's the voice of your people.
And I remember years and years ago meeting Gregory Rabassa on the beach in Long Island.
Yes.
And him telling me a story, which I guess he told everybody, about how he'd been at a press conference with Garcia Marquez, who had said that the English translation of 100 Years of Solitude was better than the Spanish original.
Yeah.
And I mean, probably not true, but you can see how much it meant to Rabassa that Garcia Marquez said that.
Yes.
So I love translators.
And
grateful.
Super. I'll get one more, and then and for context, we were both surfing in the Rockaways, I imagine. That's great. Anyway, this is a tough one, but you can say pass like a game show. How would you comfort a migrant who feels out of place?
Well, only by saying you're not alone, my friend. You know, that we, all of us who have had this life experience, often have that feeling. You know, I remember Edward Said, the great Palestinian American writer, you know, actually wrote about that feeling of being out of place, and it's not just feeling out of place in the country to which you come. It's also understanding that the place which you left, in a way, isn't there anymore, because it changed so much in your absence that when you go back, it's you can go home again, yes, in the sense that you can get on a plane and go there,
Right.
but when you get there, it's not the same place.
Yeah.
So that I think is a more poignant feeling of out of place, that you've lost the place from which you came.
Oh, you know what? Thank you for that question, and I love that you could answer that. I was already sweating, but that also brings us home. That's the closed circle. That's what you're talking about with the ground beneath your feet and the singer, like people writing a place that no longer, like that home that is held, that, you know, worlds that are gone that remain our, you know, anchor spots.
Well, it's one of the reasons why my education was as a historian, not as a novelist. You know, that was my university subject, and I've always thought that these books, however fabulous they might be, are also history novels. You know, and I've always been very interested in the past as the place to find that grounding. You know, and to see how the past brings us to where we are. You know, and so I mean, like right now, I'm writing a novel that's set in India in the 14th and 15th centuries,
Right.
which is a way of writing about India right now.
Now, yes.
Yeah.
But I can't.
To my mind, a more interesting way of doing it.
Yes. Well, I'm excited to read that, and that is a perfectly sweet spot to bring Marcia back. What a pleasure talking to you. So nice to see you. I hope it's in person next time and soon.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nathan. Thanks for doing this.
Oh my.
Remarkable, magical. And I suggest everyone, if you haven't bought the book, there is a link in the chat. If you go to the top of it, you can see the link for Watchung Bookstore and you can buy it. This is a book to savor. This is a book to spend time in, not to speed read, is spend a month rereading it. We thank both of you for coming. We thank our audience. Please save the date for October 2nd, which will be our hybrid festival. You can get more information on succeedtogether.org. You can also support Succeed Together's programs. There's a support button in green on the bottom of your screen. Thanks and have a good evening.